The floorboards are cold under my bare feet. So cold, they seem to steal the warmth right out of my bones, a premonition I don't yet understand. I'm standing in the doorway of what used to be our shared dream, a little sun-drenched space we called the project room. Now, it's just empty, stripped bare. Not just of furniture, but of possibility. A single dust mote dances in the weak morning light slanting through the window, a tiny, indifferent star in my collapsing universe. My breath hitches. It's not just the room, it's everything. That's the thought that slams into me, a physical blow. Everything is about to be stripped bare. If you've ever felt that sickening lurch, that moment the world tilts on its axis and nothing feels real, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you find yourself in these stories, please subscribe. It means more than you can imagine. Just last week, life was normal, predictable, even. Coffee at 7, work by 9, dinner discussions about whether to paint the kitchen eggshell or vanilla ice, the kind of mundane that feels like a warm blanket when it's yours. Mark and I, we weren't a fairy tale, but we were solid. 15 years, a house, a rhythm. He was an architect, precise and ambitious. I had my own small consulting business, run from home, a venture I'd poured my heart into, my little LLC, a shield, and a testament to my own quiet ambition. We had a joint account for the big things: mortgage, utilities, the dream vacation to Tuscany we'd been saving for. And then we had our personal accounts for the day-to-day. Standard, sensible. Or so I thought. My desire, if I had to name it, was simple: contentment. A life built, not on grand passions, but on shared trust and quiet joys. The Tuscany Fund was more than just money. It was a symbol of that shared future, each deposit a brick in the villa of our later years. Mark seemed to share this. He'd talk about the cypress trees, the wine, the way the light fell in the evenings. His eyes would get that soft, faraway look. I believed him. I believed in the picture he painted. The inciting incident wasn't a dramatic reveal. No sudden confrontation in a rain-swept street. It was an email. A bland, automated notification from our joint bank. Insufficient funds. I stared at it, my brow furrowed. Insufficient for what? The mortgage payment was due, yes, but we always kept a healthy buffer. More than healthy. Tuscany healthy. I clicked the link, a little annoyed, expecting a minor glitch, a transfer that hadn't cleared. The page loaded. The numbers swam. 0. A perfect, cruel circle. Not just low, not just insufficient, empty. Our life savings, the Tuscany Fund, the emergency buffer, the 15 years of careful planning and small sacrifices, gone. A void where our future was supposed to be. My hand flew to my mouth, a gasp lodging in my throat like a shard of glass. It had to be a mistake, a system error, a hack. Anything but the truth that was starting to bloom, cold and poisonous, in my gut. My first call, naturally, was to the bank. I remember my voice, high-pitched, a stranger's voice, stumbling over the security questions. The customer service representative was polite, patient, her voice a calm drone against the rising panic in my chest. No, there was no error. Yes, the funds were withdrawn. A series of large transfers, she explained, over the past 3 weeks. To another account, an internal transfer, initially, then wired out. My blood ran cold. "Can you tell me who authorized these?" I whispered, already knowing the answer, dreading it. There were only 2 names on the account, mine and Mark's. The primary account holder, Mr. Mark Thompson, authorized the transfers, ma'am. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a sterile delivery of a devastating blow. Mr. Mark Thompson. My Mark. The man who talked of Tuscan sunsets. I hung up, the phone slipping from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the sudden, vast silence of the house. For a long moment I just stood there, swaying slightly, the world tilting. He wouldn't, he couldn't. There had to be an explanation. A terrible, awful, but somehow justifiable explanation. A business emergency he hadn't told me about? A desperate loan to a family member? My mind scrabbled for reasons, for anything other than the betrayal that was clawing its way up my throat. When Mark came home that evening, I was sitting in the dark, the bank statement printed out, lying on the coffee table like an accusation. He flicked on the light, blinked, a smile starting to form, then faltering as he saw my face. "Hey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." My voice was flat, devoid of the storm raging inside me. "The joint account, Mark, it's empty." He feigned surprise, a little too quickly, a little too dramatically. "What? Empty? That's impossible. Must be a bank error." "I called the bank," I said, my gaze unwavering. "They said you authorized the transfers." His face changed then. The surprise morphed into something else. Defensiveness, a flicker of, was it guilt, or just annoyance at being questioned? "Oh, that," he said, waving a dismissive hand, trying for casual but missing it by a mile. "Yeah, I had to move some money around, a short-term investment, big opportunity. It's all fine, it'll be back in there, doubled, before you know it." "A short-term investment?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Without telling me? Our entire savings, Mark? The money for Tuscany? The mortgage payment is due." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, the picture of a man burdened by financial complexities too great for my simple mind. "Look, Sarah, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand the details. Just trust me, okay? It's a sure thing." "Trust you?" The words were quiet, but they hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "You emptied our account, Mark. You didn't just move some money around, you took everything." He started to get angry then, the classic defense. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's my money too. I'm trying to build a better future for us, and all you can do is nag." The gaslighting was so blatant, so insulting, it almost took my breath away. But a strange coldness was settling over me, pushing past the initial shock and hurt. This wasn't the Mark I knew. Or maybe, it was the Mark I had refused to see. The next few days were a blur of strained silences and hollow assurances from him. He was evasive, irritable, brushing off my questions with increasing impatience. "It's handled," he'd snap, or "Stop worrying so much." But I was worried. I was more than worried. I was terrified, and a cold, hard knot of suspicion was tightening in my stomach. He offered no details about this supposed investment, no names, no companies, no paperwork. Just vague promises and a demand for trust he had already shattered. I started digging. It felt wrong, like a betrayal in itself, snooping through his things. But what choice did I have? He'd already committed the ultimate financial infidelity. I checked his laptop search history when he was in the shower. Keywords jumped out. Luxury boutique setup costs, chic retail design, how to fund a new business. My heart pounded. This wasn't some stock market gamble. This was something else. Something personal. Then I found the emails. Buried in a subfolder of his personal account, cleverly mislabeled Project X, emails not to financial advisors or investment brokers, but to a woman named Candace. Candace, with an ICE. The name was vaguely familiar. Hadn't he mentioned a new intern at his firm a few months back? Young, ambitious, he'd said, eager to learn. The emails were full of excitement, plans, budgets, her dream, he called it, her boutique, funded by him, by us. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of icy rage. It wasn't just the money, it was the deceit, the elaborate lies, the fact that he had stolen our future to build one for someone else, for his mistress. The word tasted vile on my tongue. Tuscany, our shared dream, traded for some 20-something's temple to fast fashion. The humiliation burned, hotter than the anger, hotter than the grief. I found receipts. Online orders for shop fittings, designer labels, point-of-sale systems, all shipped to an address uptown, a newly leased commercial space. All paid for from a new bank account. An account I traced back to the initial large transfer from our joint savings. He hadn't just moved money around. He'd systematically drained us. For her. The next few days were a performance. I smiled. I made dinner. I listened to his distracted chatter about work, all the while a storm gathering inside me. He seemed oblivious, buoyed by his secret, by his grand gesture for Candace. He probably thought I'd bought his flimsy story about the investment. He probably thought I was just Sarah, predictable. Trusting. A little dim, maybe. He had no idea the woman sitting across the dinner table from him was meticulously gathering evidence, her mind whirring, colder and sharper than he could ever imagine. The deepest crisis wasn't just the financial ruin or the infidelity, it was the shattering of my own identity. Who was I, if not his wife, his partner? What was our life, if it was all built on such a monumental lie? I felt adrift, lost. For a few days, I wallowed. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut. I replayed every moment, every shared laugh, every whispered promise, searching for the cracks I'd missed. The future I'd envisioned, the quiet contentment, the Tuscan sunsets, had been incinerated. All that was left was ash and the bitter taste of betrayal. Then, one morning, sifting through a pile of his discarded papers he'd carelessly left on his desk, more boutique plans, invoices, I saw it. A small, almost insignificant detail on a business registration form for Candace's closet, a throwaway line, an address for service, a company registration number. My company registration number. The registration number for my LLC, my consulting business, the one I'd built from scratch, poured my sweat and tears into, the one he'd always dismissed as my little hobby. My breath caught. It couldn't be. Why would he? I scrambled to my own files, pulling out my incorporation documents. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the print. But there it was. Identical. He had registered her boutique, funded with our money, under my limited liability company. A hysterical laugh bubbled up, raw and shaky. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it, the stupidity. Did he think I'd never find out? Did he think it was just a meaningless string of numbers he could pluck from the air? Or did he, in some twisted way, think he was being clever, perhaps shielding himself by using an existing, legitimate business entity? Maybe he thought it offered some kind of tax benefit, some veneer of legitimacy he couldn't get by himself quickly. Whatever his reasoning, it was the single stupidest, most self-sabotaging mistake he could have possibly made. And in that moment, something shifted within me. The despair, the grief, it didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a new, cold clarity, a chillingly calm resolve. He hadn't just betrayed me. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had, in his monumental arrogance, handed me the very weapon I needed to dismantle his new, illicit little world. My LLC, my rules, my company. And therefore, technically, my boutique. The midpoint shift wasn't just a realization, it was an awakening. The fog of sorrow and confusion lifted, replaced by a steely determination. He thought I was just the quiet wife, easily fooled, easily dismissed. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He had no idea that beneath the gentle exterior was a woman who had meticulously built her own business, understood contracts, and knew her rights. He'd used my carefully constructed legal shield as a Trojan horse for his affair, and now I was going to use it to burn his Troy to the ground. My first call was to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright. I laid it all out, the drained account, the mistress, the boutique, and the critical detail, the LLC. I could hear the intake of breath on the other end of the line. He registered a new retail business, funded by marital assets he improperly converted, under your existing LLC, without your explicit operational consent for this specific venture? She clarified, her voice already betraying a hint of predatory delight. Lawyers, I'm learning, love a clear-cut case of egregious stupidity. Yes, I said, a grim satisfaction starting to bloom. That's exactly what he did. Well, Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Albright said, a smile in her voice, this is remarkably straightforward. As the sole director and owner of your LLC, you have complete operational control over any business conducted under its name, including, it would seem, Candace's closet. The turning point wasn't a tearful breakdown or a shouted accusation. It was a quiet click of a pen as I signed the documents Miss Albright prepared. Cease and desist letters. Letters to suppliers. Letters to the bank where the boutique's new account was held, an account that, it turned out, was technically a subsidiary account under my LLC's main business banking. Something Mark must have finagled with the bank manager he played golf with, likely misrepresenting the nature of the new branch of my expanding consulting firm. The tendrils of his deceit were deep, but my LLC was the root. The plan was simple, brutal, and entirely legal. Since Candace's closet was operating under my LLC, I was, in effect, its owner. I could shut it down. I could change the locks. I could liquidate the assets, and I would. The days leading up to it were filled with a strange, almost out-of-body calmness. Mark continued his charade, blissfully unaware. He was more cheerful than usual, full of smug satisfaction, no doubt picturing the grand opening of the boutique, his adoring mistress on his arm. He'd even started humming around the house, a jaunty, infuriating tune. Each hum was like a nail hammered into the coffin of our marriage, but also a spur to my resolve. I arranged for a locksmith. I contacted a commercial auction house, discreetly, to get an estimate on a rapid liquidation of boutique stock and fittings. Miss Albright drew up papers to freeze the boutique's operating account, citing unauthorized expenditures and potential fraud against the LLC, which, technically, it was. He was using my company's good standing to secure credit lines for Candace's inventory that I hadn't approved. The deepening crisis was his, though he didn't know it yet. For me, it was a period of meticulous, cold preparation. I moved half of my clothes and personal belongings to a small, short-term rental apartment. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I gathered all my important documents. I was detaching myself, piece by piece, from the life we had built, or rather, the life I thought we had built. There was a profound sadness in it, a quiet mourning for the man I thought he was, for the future I thought we had. But overlaying that sadness was a grim sense of purpose. He had lit the match, but I was going to control the burn. The night before, I barely slept, not from anxiety, but from a strange, coiled anticipation. It was like waiting for a storm to break. Mark snored softly beside me, oblivious. I looked at his face in the dim light filtering through the curtains. A stranger's face. How had I not seen the duplicity, the selfishness, lurking beneath the familiar features? Or had I simply chosen not to? The climax arrived on a Tuesday morning. Candace's closet was scheduled for its soft launch that afternoon. Mark had taken the day off, for a big client meeting, he'd said, winking. I knew he was heading to the boutique to play the proud benefactor. I got there an hour before him. The locksmith was already at work, a burly, silent man who asked no questions. The click of the old lock yielding, the whir of the new one being installed. It was the sweetest music I'd heard in weeks. Inside, the boutique was exactly as I'd imagined from the receipts and emails. Chic, minimalist, full of flimsy, overpriced clothes. Sickly sweet floral perfume hung in the air. Candace's dream, built on my money, under my company's name. I had the official LLC documents with me, a copy of my driver's license, and a letter from Ms. Albright asserting my authority. The sole employee, a young woman probably hired by Candace, looked bewildered as I calmly explained that the business was undergoing an immediate operational restructuring under the direction of the LLC owner, me, and that her services were, regrettably, no longer required for the day. I handed her 2 weeks' severance, paid in cash from my personal, untouched account. It wasn't her fault. Then, I waited. I sat on a ridiculously uncomfortable lucite stool behind the stark white sales counter, the keys to my boutique in my hand. The quiet was profound. The minutes ticked by. Any moment now. Right on cue, Mark's car pulled up. He practically bounded out, a wide, proud smile on his face. He was followed by Candace, clinging to his arm, preening, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She was young, blonde, and dressed in something that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. They stopped dead at the door, seeing the new lock. Confusion clouded Mark's face. He jiggled the handle. Nothing. Then he saw me through the glass, sitting there. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter, comical disbelief. He fumbled for his own key, the one that no longer worked. Candace was tugging at his arm, her voice a shrill query. I stood up and unlocked the door from the inside, stepping aside to let them in. Sarah, what the hell are you doing here? Mark's voice was a low growl, confusion warring with dawning anger. How did you get in? Candace looked from him to me, her perfectly painted mouth agape. Who is this? She demanded, her voice dripping with petulance. This, I said, my voice calm, level, is Sarah Thompson. the owner of the LLC under which this boutique, Candace's Closet, is registered. And as of this morning, the person who has taken full operational control of this establishment." Mark's face went white. Absolutely, astonishingly white. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "What? What are you talking about? Your LLC? What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything, Mark," I said, allowing myself a small, cold smile. "You registered this entire venture, this monument to your indiscretion, under my company. My legitimate hard-earned business. Did you really think I wouldn't find out, or did you just not care?" Candace finally seemed to grasp the situation. Her eyes widened in panic. "Mark, what is she saying? This is my boutique, you said." "He said a lot of things, dear, I'm sure," I interjected smoothly. "But the paperwork, unfortunately for you both, tells a different story. All these lovely clothes, these fixtures, purchased with funds funneled through, and assets now legally belonging to, my LLC. Invoices, bank statements, registration documents, it's all quite clear." Mark finally found his voice, sputtering. "You can't do this. This is insane. That money was an investment. An investment you made fraudulently, using marital assets without my consent, and even more foolishly, by co-opting my legal business entity," I replied, my voice like ice. "Miss Albright, my lawyer, assures me I can do this. In fact, I already have. The locks are changed. The bank account associated with this storefront under my LLC is frozen. And in about an hour, a liquidation company will be here to begin cataloging the inventory for auction." Candace let out a strangled sob. "My dream, my shop," she wailed, looking at Mark with accusing eyes. "You promised me." Mark stared at me, his face a mask of fury and dawning horror. The betrayal he'd so casually inflicted was now staring him right back in the face, magnified, amplified by his own stupidity. He, the architect of grand designs, had built his own prison. You planned this," he whispered, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a sick realization. "Not initially," I admitted. "Initially, I was just devastated. But then I found the LLC registration. You handed me the keys to your destruction, Mark. All I had to do was turn them." He looked around the boutique, at the racks of clothes, the gleaming counters, his grand gesture to his mistress, now a testament to his epic misjudgment. It was all ash, turning to dust before his eyes. And the most satisfying part? He had no one to blame but himself. He had pointed the gun directly at his own temple and pulled the trigger by using my LLC. He thought he was being clever, using an established entity. He had no idea he was walking into a steel trap of my making, baited with his own arrogance. The plot twist was a beautiful, terrible thing to witness, his face crumbling as the full weight of his miscalculation landed. He hadn't just lost the money, he hadn't just been caught. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed by the wife he'd so clearly underestimated. He hadn't just lost his affair's grand stage, he'd potentially lost far more, as all assets here were now under my control, part of my LLC, ready to be liquidated to recoup the funds he'd stolen from our joint life. He was completely, utterly blindsided. His attempt to build her a dream had resulted in him handing me the power to reclaim what was mine, and then some. The win bigger wasn't just about the money. It was about the absolute reversal of power, the undeniable proof of his folly and my strength. The liquidators arrived, efficient and impersonal. Mark and Candace stood by, numbly, as they began their work. There were no more shouts, no more accusations. Just the quiet, methodical dismantling of their fantasy. Candace eventually dissolved into tears and fled, leaving Mark alone, a broken man amidst the ruins of his deceit. He looked at me, one last time, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Hatred, regret, or just sheer, baffled disbelief. "Why?" he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "You should have respected the LLC, Mark," I said softly. "You should have respected me." Then I turned and walked out, leaving him to the liquidators and the consequences of his actions. I didn't look back. The aftermath was messy, but it was my mess to control. Ms. Albright was a shark. The funds from the liquidation of Candace's closet went directly into my LLC's account, recouping a significant portion of what Mark had taken. Since he'd used marital funds for an unauthorized venture that was legally mine, the assets were mine to claim. He tried to fight it, of course. His lawyer blustered about marital property, but Miss Albright coolly pointed out the fraudulent conversion of assets into a business entity solely owned by me, using my established business credentials without proper authorization for this specific, unrelated enterprise. The paper trail was irrefutable. His grand gesture to Candace ended up enriching me, or at least significantly mitigating my losses. That was the bigger win. Not just karma, but a tangible financial clawback engineered by his own hubris. The divorce was swift. He had no leverage. His infidelity was blatant, his financial misconduct even more so. He was left with his debts, his ruined reputation at his firm once word got out, and it did, and the bitter knowledge that his attempt to betray me had backfired spectacularly. Candace, from what I heard, disappeared from his life as quickly as she'd appeared, her dreams of boutique ownership shattered. No sugar daddy, no shop. For me, there was a period of quiet rebuilding. The Tuscany fund was gone, but I had my LLC, stronger than ever, ironically. I had my self-respect. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, felt different. Colder, emptier, but also mine. I painted the kitchen stormy gray, a color I'd always loved, but Mark had vetoed. It felt like a small act of defiance, of reclaiming my space, my taste. There are scars, of course. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight. The memory of his betrayal is a bitter pill, a constant reminder of how thoroughly I was deceived. But there's also a strange, quiet strength that came from walking through that fire. I learned that I am more resourceful, more resilient than I ever gave myself credit for. He thought I was the wallpaper in his life, pleasant, unassuming, easily ignored. He found out I was the foundation, and he tried to build his illicit castle on ground he didn't own. Life is different now, quieter, perhaps, more solitary, but it's honest, it's mine. The sun still slants through the windows in the morning, but now it illuminates a space I'm slowly, carefully, refilling with my own dreams, my own possibilities. Maybe Tuscany is still in the cards someday. But if I go, I'll go alone, or with someone who understands that trust isn't just a word, it's the bedrock of everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find strength in the ruins, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Your stories remind me we're not alone in these battles. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe. It helps bring more of these narratives to life, more than you know. Thanks for being here.